What's good, Cubers? It's your boy Matt, and I'm back, and this week we got an exciting video coming because rotation is about to happen. What? No, I'm just kidding about all that. But really, rotation is about to happen, and that means it's Christmas/shopping time for Cubers. After all those expensive standard cards you've been putting off buying, they're about to rotate and be affordable. So today we're going to talk about cards that you might have wanted to include in your cube, but maybe there were price restrictions or you were waiting for the card to get a little cheaper. So we're going to do just a little bit of MTG finance talk, which brings me to an important point. I am not an MTG finance expert. So yeah, the advice you're getting today is worth exactly what you're paying for it, because you're not paying anything for it. Unless you're a patron, in which case it's worth every single dollar. Yep, every single dollar, or both of the dollars that you might be paying for it. So yeah, shout out, thank you to y'all. Yeah, my advice, expert advice. Anyway, here we go. Let's talk about one of my buddy Zolthux's favorite cards, and that's Divine Visitation. That's right, we're gonna start in white, big shocker. Divine Visitation is a build around enchantment that some people play in their cubes. Higher power environments probably wanna avoid it because it is a 5-mana enchantment. When this card was released, it was $16. It's a $16 enchantment. But then a funny thing happened. About a month after release, the price on this card dropped to $5, and now it's all the way back up to $13. Well, what's happened is this card is not played in standard anywhere. This is a commander card. And so commander token decks play this card so that they can make lots and lots of angel tokens. So as a result, Divine Visitation is a card that if you want to play it in your cube, I encourage you to pick it up now, because this is one of the few cards we're going to talk about in this video where its price isn't going down. You see, because it doesn't see play in any format but commander, the price on this card is already held up by that format, and after rotation, it's not like it's leaving commander. So Divine Visitation, if you want to try it out, you need to go ahead and pick it up, because I think this card is only going to tick up in price over time. But let's talk about a white card that was expensive and now definitely is much more affordable, and that's Gideon Blackblade from War of the Spark. I love this card. 3-mana Gids is the real deal, and part of the reason I love it is that it plays well in white weenie decks, but it also plays fine in control decks, because Gideon's indestructible nature allows him to dodge a lot of different kinds of board wipes. Now, when this card was released, it was a staple of white weenie and saw a lot of play in standard, and it was $20. But I don't know if you've noticed, and we're going to talk about this a few times during the video, standard's been kind of broken the last year or so, and as a result, white weenie has not been viable, and Gids is down to being $4.75. The only place outside of standard where Gideon sees play is historic, and historic is not exactly a paper format, so you can expect Gideon probably to be even cheaper than this, because the only other place it's going to see play after it rotates is people playing like Super Friends style decks in EDH, and I don't think it's very good there either. So if you're looking for a great 3-mana walker that can be either in mid-range, control, or aggro, I love this card. Gideon Blackblade is a solid choice. Now, if we go to blue, blue has had an embarrassment of riches over the last year or so. So we're going to start off with a card that isn't exactly expensive, but I do want to talk about it, and that's Narset, Parter of Veils. This is part of that uncommon group of walkers from War of the Spark, and originally this card was $4.26. Yeah, so Narset is played in every format. Every format. She's played in Vintage, in Legacy, in Commander, in Modern, in Standard. This girl is all over the map. And her price, because War of the Spark was heavily opened, has dropped all the way down to $1.04. I don't actually think that it's going to go below this after rotation. I think this is one of those weird uncommons that later on could be expensive and maybe even upshifted to rare in a master set. So if you're looking for a copy of Narset, I do think now is the time to go ahead and pick it up. I will say in terms of cube play, she can lead to some polar matchups, because when she's played by a control deck against another control deck, she tends to shut off their draw and create feel bads. She plays pretty fairly in most other matchups by virtue of not being able to protect herself in any way, but in the control mirror, she definitely can create some polarity inside those games. But let's move on to another great blue card from War of the Spark, and that's Eternal Kefnet. I love this card. In case you weren't following the channel around the time War of the Spark came out, I am a huge fan of Kefnet and his giant body. For 4 mana, you get a 4/5 flyer, which means this can be the top end of a tempo deck, or it can be a 4 mana finisher for a control deck, and that God Eternal line down there at the bottom that tucks Kefnet 3 deep, you're in blue. So a lot of times you can just play a Preordain and draw right down to him. So God Eternal Kefnet's tuck ability is not much of a disadvantage, and this guy is great at coming down and shutting down aggro decks. Aggro decks have to 2-for-1 themselves to get rid of Kefnet. You have to swing in with Goblin Guide and then bolt Kefnet on top of that. And the downside for the aggro player is that Kefnet is just 3 deep and he's coming back. So your path to victory is very much on a clock because Kefnet's just going to come down and make you do the whole thing over again. Now when this card was released, it was $20. People really thought Kefnet was going to be great in Standard. And to be honest, he wasn't. Kefnet is pretty much an EDH only card at this point, and his price has been trending down over the last several months, so I think he's only going to get cheaper. He's already just $4.37. If you wait till after rotation, he'll probably be a little bit cheaper than that. I think this is a solid budget pickup for any cube, and I also think despite the Tuck It 3 Deep ability, it's still a pretty fair card as well. It is still subject to exile effects. It is very much just a big Baneslayer. That middle text right there is mostly flavor text. It happens occasionally, but in general, it's just flavor text. But did I mention that blue had an embarrassment of riches? Because this is the year where I saw lots of players stop playing Mole Drifter, and it's all because Cavalier of Gales dropped in Core 20. This is a 5/5 beater that brainstorm when it enters, scries when it leaves, and shuffles itself in. And so I have removed this guy from the board only to have my wife shuffle it into the deck, scry to, and then just accidentally draw it again and replay it. I should have cut the deck better or something. Anyway, the point is Cavalier is now the premier 5-drop finisher in blue that's not a walker. When the card was released, it was a $9 card, but it doesn't see play in any format outside of Standard. Similar to God Eternal Kefnet, its price has just been steadily ticking down over the last few months, and I think it's going to go even lower than this. At this point, Cavalier is pretty much a cube and EDH only card, so if you're looking to grab a copy of Cavalier Gales, I strongly encourage you to do so. The card is very good, and don't let that triple blue and the casting cost throw you off, as most control decks are a little blue heavy anyway. I promise you that drawback isn't as big of a drawback as you think it is. Did I mention that blue had an embarrassment of riches this year? Let me talk to you about my favorite 3-mana blue planeswalker, Mooyan Ling. I love this card, and I love her because she does double duty in multiple decks. She's good in tempo decks where she can come down and nerf your opponent's creature so that you can attack in with yours, and she's great in control decks because she can come down and nerf your opponent's 2-drop and then make a bird the next turn that they then have to 2-for-1 themselves to get rid of. So Mooyan Ling does it all and fits into multiple decks, but she also does it all very fairly. It doesn't feel like her plus puts her loyalty at a range that's too high to get rid of her, and her minusing down to 1 on the following turn also is very fair. If your opponent is able to remove the bird, they can attack into Mooyan Ling and kill her. So I love this card, a very good walker, but a very fair walker. Now when she was released, she was $23 because people really thought that Mooyan Ling was going to have an impact on Standard, and she didn't. She didn't have an impact on Standard at all. The only place where Mooyan Ling sees play is Standard, and not very much, and Brawl. So after rotation, this card isn't going to have a home in any format. The price on it has already ticked down to $2.98. So yeah, it's going to go lower. This could be a mythic planeswalker that's around $1 by the time all things are said and done. So Mooyan Ling, if you haven't tried her out, she's going to be very affordable. I strongly encourage you to pick up a copy. But let's leave blue for just a second and take a look at black. When this next card was spoiled for Guilds of Ravnica, the cube community went nuts. We said, this is the black 5-drop we've been waiting for. Doom Whisperer, a 6/6 flying trampler that can surveil. Like, this is what we want. And as a result, its price tag reflected that it's what everyone wanted. Now the thing about Doom Whisperer is it didn't make a splash in Standard like everyone thought it would. Everyone thought like this will be the new control finisher, but it never really materialized. And I can tell you that after a year of playing it in our cube that I cut it just like last week, it's fine. It's not crazy, it's not bonkers, it's very fair. Doom Whisperer is a fine card, but it's not the black 5-drop that we thought we wanted. In fact, I've had more luck with Obnixilis and Eternal Bantu than I have had with Doom Whisperer. Still, if you're looking for a very fair 5-mana Baneslayer-ish creature, Doom Whisperer is still a fine cube card. When the card was released, it was $25. People were sure that this mythic was going to take hold in Standard, and it 100% did not. It did not take hold in Standard. In fact, the only place that Doom Whisperer sees play nowadays is in Commander and EDH decks, right? Like Demon Tribal, Graveyard Shenanigan decks, because the surveillability is good there and you start at 40 life. So as a result, Doom Whisperer is nowhere near a $25 card anymore. It's $4.14. But because it really is just relegated to Commander now, I can see it dropping a little bit in price, but not a lot. I think it's probably going to go under $4, but I don't think it's going to become a bulk rare either, because it is a 6/6 flying demon. Instead, I've had more luck with Eternal Bantu, so let's take a minute and just talk about him while we've got him on the screen. Eternal Bantu I like because Menace. Menace is not flying or trample, but Menace does require multiple blockers. Also, he's got the typical God text, which makes him very hard to get rid of permanently because he just comes back later. And you might be thinking, Matt, this is just another big Baneslayer, and you could see it that way. But most of the time when we cast Eternal Bantu, we've got a spare land or a couple of spare tokens, and we're able to sack them to his Enter the Battlefield effect and draw a couple of cards off of him. So as a result, Eternal Bantu is less a Baneslayer and more a really awesome Mole Drifter, so long as you got a couple of permanents to sacrifice. People will argue that Bantu is only good in aristocrat-style decks or cubes that support aristocrats, and they're right that he's excellent in those decks, but he's also just fine on his own. Now, the good news about Eternal Bantu is he never really saw any meaningful Standard play, and no one ever thought he was going to, so chances are you might have already picked him up because he was just $5.37. Well, now he's half that. He's $2.18. This is another card that only sees play in Standard, Historic, and Commander. And since he's rotating out of Standard and Historic isn't a real paper format, I expect him to get even a little bit cheaper than this. So be on the lookout if you want to try Eternal Bantu. He's going to be really affordable, and I promise you he's much better than he's given credit. But let's move on and talk about Black Aggro, because they got some really sweet pieces over the last year, and one of my favorite 3-drops is up next, and that's Spawn of Mayhem. That's right, I said my best 3-drop, because if you are paying full price for this guy, you are doing it wrong. Most of the time he's in the Black Aggro deck. You're going to cast him for a spectacle cost, so you get a 3-mana 4/4 flying trampler. That's almost as big as Doom Whisperer, but for 3 mana. And then he is dealing an extra damage on your upkeep every turn, so he's a pseudo 5/4. I love this card. Now, if you don't support Black Aggro, Spawn of Mayhem's not for you. But if you are trying to amp up your Black Aggro package, this little guy can do a ton of work, and everyone thought he was going to, which is why he was $20 when he was released. But the thing is Spawn of Mayhem really only sees play in Black Aggro decks. He sees play in Rakdos Aggro in Standard, and some Black Aggro builds in Pioneer. And as a result of not seeing play in any other format, and not even really seeing Commander play, Spawn of Mayhem is $3, and he's gonna be cheaper after rotation because the only deck that might be playing it a little will be Black Aggro in Pioneer. So I expect this card to be very affordable. If you're rocking a Black Aggro package, Spawn of Mayhem is for you. But let's talk about another busted War of the Spark Planeswalker, because we haven't looked at enough of those yet. Let's talk about Liliana the Dreadhorde General. This is a beautiful control finisher. Beautiful. 6 mana, makes a zombie every turn, draws you cards, cleans up your opponent's board, dodges board wipes, everything a control deck could want. The problem with Lilya, especially when she was released, is that her price tag is impressive. At $45, that's a lot of money for a standard legal piece of cardboard. Lily sees play in Sultai ramp and Sultai control builds, but her real home is in EDH, where her -4 is basically a board wipe that draws you cards as you sack your own creatures. So Lilya sees a lot of play in Commander, and she sees a little bit of play in these Sultai ramp and control decks, like I said, but her price tag has still dropped dramatically. She's $16 now. Now you might ask me, Matt, $16, that's still a lot of money. Is she gonna be cheaper? And my gut answer is a little bit, but not much. I think a lot of this card's value is propped up in the Commander community, as she's just one of the best Lilya planeswalkers that you can hope to play if you're in black in Commander, because of the way she dominates the board and the way she refills your hand, because in Commander you never want to run out of gas. So I think she might drop $1 or $2, but I don't think that she's dropping down under 10 under any circumstances. That being said, I don't know that this is a card you need to run out and pick up anyway. Like I said, Lily is great in a control deck that plays black, but there's a colorless walker that does basically what she does, and that card is good in any color control deck, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's keep going, because we got more black aggro to talk about, and aggro is where it's at. Knight of the Ebon Legion was printed in M20, and this sucker is one of the best black 1-drops you could be playing in Cube, short of maybe Bloodsoaked Champion. I love this card, and it sees play in a bunch of formats. It sees play in Pioneer, in black aggro decks, it sees play in Rakdos aggro decks in Standard. So the card is played in multiple formats and does a lot of good work, and as a result, its price was $11 a card, and this is a rare. Still, because black aggro is kind of a niche deck, the price on this card has changed dramatically since it was released, and now it's only $2. I think it'll go down a little bit when it leaves Standard, but I think Pioneer will keep its price above $1. Still, if you support black aggro, you need a copy of Knight of the Ebon Legion. Card does amazing work. But let's talk about a card that everyone was excited when it was spoiled, and I wasn't impressed, and see where we came out. Let's talk about Rotting Regisaur. So this is another aggro piece, a 3-mana 7/6 that has the downside of making you discard on your upkeep. Most people thought that this would be a sweet cube card because you could discard to it and, quote, black doesn't care about discard. However, aggro decks do care about discard because they don't draw a lot of cards. They can't replace the cards in their hand. So a lot of times you get lucky on the first Rotting Regisaur discard, and maybe you throw something like, I don't know, Bloodghast that doesn't mind being in the graveyard. But after that, the discard tends to be real, and so you're kind of riding Rotting Regisaur, hoping that he'll get you there in terms of combat. Now the card was $6 at its peak, and if you really want to pick up a copy, I got good news for you, because it is only played in Standard almost entirely, and it's gonna rotate, which means even though it's $3 now, I think this is a bulk rare in the near future. This card is not that great in Cube, but if you do like the discard outlet on him and you're looking for another aggro piece, Rotting Regisaur can fill that role. He's no Knight of the Ebon Legion, but he's okay. But that's enough of these black cards. Let's keep going and move to red, where one of my favorite cards from this format comes from, and that's Krinko 10 Street Kingpin. Yes, right, boys and girls, in the last year we have gotten a ton of different Rabblemaster variants, and Krinko, he's one of the best ones. Now, he's only playable in red aggro, but that's fine for me. He wears equipment like a boss. You slide grafted war gear on this guy, and then you're really cooking. When this card was printed, red aggro was really a pretty decent deck, and so it commanded not an unreasonable price of $7 a card. But since Standard got broken, Krinko is only played in red aggro decks, and he's not good enough to make the red aggro decks in other formats, and so his price has dropped, well, a lot. He's 89 cents. So this card has already hit bulk rare status. It might even go a little cheaper than this, but let's be honest, we're just talking about dimes at this point, so there's no reason you can't go out and pick one up. The only place that Krinko sees play now is in Goblin tribal decks in a format like Commander, where they need all the goblins they can get. Speaking of fun cards for red aggro, let's take a minute and look at my girl, Chandra Acolyte of Flame. That's right, M20 was all about Chandra Tribal, and I really like this one. Yes, she's only playable in the red aggro deck, or the Rakdos Aristocrats deck, and that's pretty much where she sees play in Standard, not in Rakdos Aristocrats, but in red aggro and in Cavalier aggro in particular. Now, when Chandra was released, she commanded a roughly $9 price tag, but since red aggro is no good in Standard anymore because of all the incidental life gain, her price has dropped a lot, especially since she doesn't see play in any other format. She's $1.34 now. I expect her to be a bulk rare after rotation. I really enjoy this card. I don't think she's going to be in my cube forever, but she is a really sweet support piece to give aggro some play against white's board wipes, because she can survive them and keep making you those tokens. And she demands early interaction from your opponents. If they don't try and answer Chandra, then on turn 4 or 5, she's most likely killed them. So I've been very impressed with this Chandra. You should playtest her. It's going to be really cheap to do so. But like I said, M20 is Chandra Tribal, so let's talk about the big girl on the block. Chandra Awakened Inferno, our 6 mana, 6 loyalty walker that pluses to 8 the first time you use her. I love this Chandra. Now she again is only for control decks. The emblem is a real clock, her -3 is a board wipe, her -X is a permanent removal piece most of the time. I love this Chandra. I actually like her better than Chandra Flamecaller. Players will feel differently about this, but I enjoy the inevitability of her emblems putting her opponents on a very, very real clock. So Chandra Awakened Inferno is a fun red control finisher for me. And the rest of the world knows it too, apparently, because she was $50 when she was released. Everyone thought that she was going to have a huge impact on Standard, and like Doom Whisperer before her, instead, Chandra Awakened Inferno is pretty much a Brawl and EDH card. Now, she's fantastic in EDH because the emblems go on all your opponents. So she provides inevitability on everyone sitting at the table, which is super, super sweet. That's probably what's keeping her price where it is at $11. I don't see this card getting much cheaper after rotation, so if you want a playtester, you should probably go ahead and thinking about picking one up, because again, the card doesn't see play in Standard. Most of its value is propped up from it being played in Commander, although I have to be honest, I have never once seen this card cast in a Commander game, so I could be wrong, it wouldn't be the first time, but I'm thinking that's where most of her value comes from. So, if you want to pick up a Chandra Awakened Inferno, go ahead and do so. I don't think she's getting cheaper. Now let's move to green and talk about my favorite green 5-drop. And you know what? I'm going to walk out on this limb. Here it comes, the best green 5-drop creature in cube, period. And that's Biogenic Ooze. The Ooze is king. I love this card. That's right, Deep Forest Hermit. I'm talking to you. Squirrels get wrecked. Biogenic Ooze does all the things. He provides value when he enters the battlefield, he puts your opponent on a real clock, and he came with a real price tag when it was first printed of about $12. But Ooze sees no Standard play whatsoever, and it doesn't see Modern or Legacy or Vintage play obviously either, so the only place where Biogenic Ooze sees play is Commander, which means its price tag is stupid low. Because unlike Chandra, who's good in almost any red deck, Ooze is mostly in like token decks and Ooze Tribal, I guess. So Biogenic Ooze is only $2.50. I can see this card dropping another $1.25 or so after rotation, but go ahead and grab your Ooze now. I love this card. You will not be disappointed, assuming your cube environment is a fair one. So Biogenic Ooze, grab you some copies. Love the Ooze, he's king. But let's move forward in Standard history a little bit and look at a green walker that maybe you've played against recently. Yeah, Nisha Who Shakes the World. This card has been crushing Standard ever since Oko got printed. How good is Nisha, you ask? Well, they banned Oko, they banned Growth Spiral, and it turns out Nisha's still good. Nisha's still doing things inside of Standard with Uro. So yeah, Nisha Who Shakes the World, she's the real deal. We've played her in Cube and she's plenty good there too. The only problem you might have with her in Cube is that green is stacked with quality green walkers in the 4 and 5 slot. Now, you can do what we do, which is play pretty much all of them, and we play pretty much all of them. But I encourage you to give Nisha Who Shakes the World a try. The only place she sees play outside of Standard is EDH and mono green planewalkers in Pioneer. Her price was about 14 bucks, it's like 13 and some change. But now her price is $5.33, and that's a steal for a walker who's this good. I actually like the fact that there's some risk in putting the counters on your lands so that your opponent can bolt your lands or Wrath of God your lands, and there's a real cost. So you have to think about how many lands you want to wake up and risk losing to an opponent's board wipe effect. So I've enjoyed Nisha. I don't think she's overpowered in Cube. She's good, but she's not bonkers. Nisha Who Shakes the World is a solid card and one worth picking up. I think she'll be cheaper after rotation because the only place she'll see play is in Pioneer mono green walkers. Now, we were talking about tokens earlier with Biogenic Ooze. Let's talk about tokens from M20 and one of my favorite token makers, and that's Nightpack Ambusher. Love this card too. Flash is awesome. How awesome is it? In Standard, there was Simmek Flash was a deck, until Oko got printed and wrecked the format. But prior to that, Simmek Flash was a deck, and it's kind of a secret deck in our cube. There are enough green and blue Flash pieces naturally that we can play a Simmek Flash deck inside our environment. Now, Nightpack Ambusher is a quality 4-drop, and I like being able to stress the control player's mana by casting him on instep. Then you just hold up and let him make wolfies for you. The problem you might have with him in cube, much like Nisha, is that there are a bevy of quality green 4-drops available to you. If you're in a larger cube, say 450 plus, I think the Nightpack Ambusher becomes a slam dunk. If you're in a 360 cube, you're going to have to make some tough choices. Now, when this card was released, it was only played in Simmek Flash, and that's why its price was $4.66. But Simmek Flash isn't any good in Standard anymore, and as a result, the card doesn't have a home in any format, which is why it's 50 cents. So, scoop you a copy of Nightpack Ambusher for 50 cents. You won't be sorry. It'll be something fun to play test, if nothing else. We have really enjoyed it, and hopefully after rotation, those fancy convention foils that are still $10 will, drop in price too. That would be super sweet. But that takes us to colorless, and now we can talk about the best 6-mana walker from the last year, for Cube anyway, and that's Eugen the Ineffable. Love this card. Love this card. Mid-range decks want it. Control decks want it as their finisher. Just like Liliana, he makes a 2/2 token every single turn, and when that token dies, just like Liliana, you get to draw cards. So he does something very similar to her, but because he's colorless, he's got a home in more decks. You can also -3 him to destroy a permanent. I'm all about permanent removal. That's 1 or more colors. That means Eugen deals with most threats inside your cube. Maybe not the Ginger Brute with the grafted war gear attached to it that my son beat me to death with the other week, but it's a thing. Eugen, yeah, play Eugen. Eugen is really good. He used to be $9.98. The only thing in Standard that's still playing him is Sultai Ramp and Sultai Control, using him as a finisher. Most of the time he's played in modern Tron builds, and sometimes in Commander where he's part of those like colorless Kozilek decks. So Eugen is a super sweet cube card that's only $3.48 now. Go grab you a copy. I love this card. I love him better than Papa Eugen, Spirit Dragon. This one is better because he's infinitely more castable. So Eugen the Ineffable, Eugen the Ineffable, however you and your friends know him, he's Eugen to us. I encourage you to pick up a copy. He'll be the best colorless walker in your cube. I said it right here. You're welcome. Now let's move on to multicolored, where we've got a few cards to talk about. Namely, and most importantly, we're going to talk about the best Golgari removal spell in Magic, and that's Assassin's Trophy. This card is dumb good, and it sees play in every format. Every format. It sees play in Standard, in Legacy, in Vintage, in Modern, in Commander, in Brawl, in Historic, in Pioneer, in whatever format you're playing. Assassin's Trophy is amazing, and everyone knew that when it was printed, and that's why its price tag, even as a rare, was $36. That is a lot of money for a card printed at rare. Even now, it still holds a price tag of $13, roughly. this card is not going down in price. I encourage you to just go ahead and pick them up, because it's not like it's in mass use in Standard. It's mostly only in those Sultai decks. But because it sees play in literally every format, its price is going to be propped up. So if you want an Assassin's Trophy for your cube and you didn't want to pay $40 for it, now's the time. Pick it up, pay $12. I don't think this card is going down in price. But Guilds of Ravnica brought us another decent Golgari card that's certainly worth trying out in your cube if you haven't given her a spin, and that's Vraska Golgari Queen. I like this card. I didn't like it when it was printed. We playtested this card as soon as Guilds of Ravnica was out. We put it in our cube and we were underwhelmed, let's say. And the only reason this card saw any Standard play, or any Pioneer play for that matter, is mostly because of this guy right here. Yeah, Oko, 3-mana walkers. Vraska is an answer for 3-mana walkers, but if you've been paying attention, we've actually looked at a lot of 3-mana walkers. You need to go back and look at your cube. Mooyan Ling is 3-mana. All the Gideons are 3-mana. Narset is 3-mana. Baby Chandra is 3-mana. There are a lot of 3-mana walkers running around your cube. And I think Wizards is only going to print more of them for us. So Vraska, who was underwhelming before, is back to being pretty decent now. We're actually really enjoying her far more than we were a year ago when she was printed. Now, her price tag has been as high as $30, but this is mostly because she was the best answer for dealing with Oko in the Sultai mirror match, and that's how prevalent he was in the environment, that if you were on Sultai or Golgari, you ran Vraska to deal with Oko. Once Oko got banned, Vraska's price has gotten a lot more accessible. She's only $3.10 now. Now, I'm not going to tell you that she's the best thing since sliced bread, but if you're willing to try a new walker in your cube, I think she's only going to be cheaper after rotation. Don't get me wrong, I don't think she's going to drop under $1 because very few planeswalkers do, but I could see her giving up another buck in value or so. So if you haven't tried Vraska, she's worth giving a go. But now let's go to a color pair that has literally no good cards in it whatsoever. Let's move to Simmek and talk about Hydroid Krasis. Okay, fine. Simmek's got a lot of good cards, but a year ago when Krasis was printed, you wouldn't have said that, would you? Golly, was it a year ago, a year and a half, 2 years ago? I don't know. After War of the Spark, all I remember were elk. There were elk everywhere, lots and lots of elk. The point is that Krasis marks the beginning of Simmek getting some really strong cards in Standard, and his price tag reflected that. This was a $40 card for most of the time that it's been legal in Standard. It is only since the banning of Growth Spiral and Oko that Krasis' price has come down to a more reasonable, air quotes, $16.45. The good news is that Krasis doesn't see play in many other formats. He sees play in Standard, obviously. He sees play in Historic, which is not a paper format, and he sees play in Sultai Delirium in Pioneer. So I think his price is probably going down, and I could even see it dropping under $10. So be looking to pick up your copies of Hydroid Krasis post-rotation, because I think the card is going to be a solid pickup and a very good value. Now let's talk about a card you might not be thinking about, but I'll tell you that I've been impressed with, and it hasn't always been a cheap card, and that's Dovan Grand Arbiter. That's right, another 3-mana planeswalker for Vraska to eat, but that's another discussion. We have been pleasantly surprised with Dovan. We find that not only do our control decks like having him to play early to start making Thopters to protect itself, but that also our white-blue tempo decks enjoy having him on the board as well. So Dovan has been very good and very flexible in our cube, and I like him way more than 3-mana Teferi, but that's a discussion for later. So Dovan's price when it was released was $40. People really thought that Dovan was going to make a splash in Standard. And like the Magic community frequently is, they were wildly incorrect. This card is $1.50 now. That's right, it's $1.50. I like Dovan. I like his flexibility. I like that he feels really fair. He can come down early on turn 3, but it doesn't feel like the game is ended when like a card like Oko coming down on turn 3. So if you're looking for a flexible Azurius walker to try, give Dovan a spin. I don't think he's, in the realms of the high power Azurius cards you could be playing, but I also have very much enjoyed him, and I think you might as well. All right, so it just feels like every time I do one of these shopping post-rotation budget things, we have to talk about a Teferi card, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's talk about Teferi Time Raveler. Stupid card. So here's the thing about Teferi. He's either amazing or he does nothing, and there's very little middle ground. I can tell you that when the control decks play each other in Standard, whoever lands their Teferi first wins, and Cube is the same way. The only difference is that there's only one copy of Teferi, so one of the control decks is screwed. When you play this card, your opponent is either going to be wildly affected by having their instants turned off, or they're not going to care at all, and as a result, he's middling to amazing, and I don't like the bipolar nature of the card. That being said, it did used to be $22, and $22... Now the card does see play in modern Niv to Light decks, and it sees play all over Pioneer, and it even sees some Commander play, but it did catch the banhammer in Standard, and as a result, we can kind of know what its price is going to be once it rotates, because it kinda already has. So Teferi is $12 right now, and he's not going under that, because by being banned, he has essentially rotated from the format already. So if you want to pick up a copy of Teferi, I encourage you to do it. It even sees some light legacy play. This card is very good in constructed Magic, and so if you're trying to play at a high power cube level and you want to be able to turn off some busted shenanigans occasionally, Teferi Time Raveler is a good way to do that. I want to talk about one more 3-mana walker from War of the Spark because we haven't talked about enough of them yet, and this card hasn't had a lot of huge price changes, but I think it's wonderful, and its price has changed, so I do want to highlight it really fast. This is Saheli Sublime Artificer. She's part of that string of uncommon walkers from War of the Spark, but she is far and away one of the better ones. It's like her and Narset and everybody else forgot to eat their vegetables. Now, Saheli is great in any blue deck. I know it says is it up there, but she's fine in Azurius, she's fine in Dimir. All she does is make servos all day. She's got your back, she's making blockers for you, counter that spell, make a servo, block. Saheli is wonderful, and she used to be $3. Well, she's not anymore. She doesn't see Standard play at all, as a matter of fact. The only place I see her getting any play at all is in Commander, which means she's already at bulk status at 50 cents. But I also think that these uncommon walkers are not going to be easy for Wizards to reprint just anytime they want to, which means that I do actually see her price creeping up over the next few years. I don't think it's going to be bonkers or anything, but there might be a point where this uncommon is $3 or $4, and since it's 50 cents right now, go ahead and buy it. She's going to be one of the best Is It cards in your cube, I promise. Saheli impresses. If you haven't picked this up, you need to, and she's a slam dunk in any peasant environment and pretty much any legacy unpowered environment as well. I love Saheli. Now, let's talk about the elephants in the room, and that is that the shock lands are leaving Standard. These guys are cube staples, and chances are you already have your set, but just in case you're one of the new cubers in the audience and you haven't picked up your shocks yet, these are their current prices. Now the thing about the shocks is that Wizards has reprinted them 3 times, so we have a pretty clear picture of what's going to happen to them this time because of the 2 previous. They're going to dip just a little bit after they rotate out of Standard, and then they're going to steadily tick up from now until the next time Wizards prints them again. So the shocks are staples in every format. They're played in Pioneer, they're played in Modern, they're played in Legacy, they're played in Vintage, they're played in Commander. Any format where they're legal, they're played as 4-ofs, except Commander because you're only allowed 1. So I strongly encourage you to think about picking up your shocks sooner rather than later. I'll go ahead and show you the Allegiance shocks and their prices as well. Breeding Pool is $23, y'all. That's right. Card is dumb expensive. So hopefully it's the one. It's the one you want to dip a little bit after rotation. but simmek is just so good right now in every format. That's why Misty Rainforest costs more than a Scalding Tarn now. So yeah, go ahead and pick up your shocks. Maybe you don't even wait for rotation to pick up the ones that are under $10, because these cards are not going to stay this cheap, and who knows how long it'll be before we come back to Ravnica again and have them reprinted. And like I said, they're played in every format, so go ahead and grab your shocks. They might dip after rotation, but they're going to go back up. Well, that's going to do it for today, Cubers. Hopefully I was helpful. I pointed out some cards that maybe you hadn't play tested that now are affordable and you would like to, or I've given you some ideas for things to look for after rotation. So hopefully I've been of assistance to you. There's something you could do to be of assistance to me, and that is if you want to buy any of these cards, please use the Tcgplayer affiliate link. It's in the show notes right down below. Use that link when you make your purchases at Tcgplayer. It really helps out the channel. I'd also like to thank all of my patrons. They actually saw this video a week ago, but I want to thank them for supporting me as well. Big shout out to you guys. Without you, this channel is not possible. So thank you so much. I appreciate you. If you think I missed a card, I'd love for you to point it out in the comments below so that other viewers can see it. Also, if you've got an idea or a question, something you'd like us to cover in the video, the comments are a great place to leave it. We do videos by request on occasion. I love being able to accommodate you guys as viewers. Also, you can feel free to catch us at cubefortwo on Twitter. You can catch us on Gmail the same way, at cubefortwo. We've got a podcast over in the Apple iTunes store. Check that out. And as always, and until next time, shuffle up and keep cubing, my friends.